Alright guys, hope you're all doing well, hope you're all keeping safe. With Title Update 12.1 came a few things that I've covered recently, like the Resident Evil apparel event and the next gen upgrades. If you want my impressions and feedback on the Resident Evil apparel event, then please check out my video from yesterday. Today I wanted to change focus to the optimization changes, because I think this is one of the more controversial changes the devs have made recently. And when I say controversial, I don't mean this has become a big sticking point or a debate within the community or anything. I just mean there's some people that love it, and I'd say probably the majority that love it, and then there's some people that don't. Today I wanted to discuss what's actually changed for anyone who doesn't know, and then give you my position. Drop a like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the videos, and let's begin. 75%, that's the reduction that was made on all the optimization costs. 50%, that was a reduction made on the crafting costs for optimization currencies. If you saw my video on Monday, you would have noted that at the time, I wasn't totally sure what the 50% change was, to be honest. I think I got confused because I'd read it as 50% of the crafting recipes had been removed, so naturally, I was pretty happy about that, as that was a change that I had wanted to come and talked about in videos prior to those patch notes. My issue had always been there was just too many currencies. Obviously, now that I've read through the patch notes again and played TU12.1, it didn't mean that at all, and actually means the cost of crafting optimization currencies has been reduced by 50%. I think I got confused between currencies and recipes. I find those two different. I guess that's the risk when I make a video and I don't script it and I kind of just jump straight into it willy-nilly. So for anyone who didn't see the changes and haven't played TU12.1 yet, we've had a 50% reduction on crafting costs for optimization and a 75% reduction on the cost of optimizing, which, quite frankly, scared me when I first heard about this. So what do you guys think about this change? Well, I put a poll out earlier on my community tab here on YouTube to gauge what people think about these changes, and after 3 hours we've had 478 votes. It's only a small sample size, of course, but I do think this captures kind of the overall feeling within the community, as the results closely resemble other polls that I've seen asking the same thing on social media. So what was the poll? Well, I basically asked you guys, how do you feel about the changes to the optimization costs? And there were 3 possible answers to poll on. Either they're great, not good, or on the fence. And as you can see, it was fairly close between they're great and on the fence, although they're great is clearly in the lead, with not good being dead last, which actually doesn't come as much of a surprise to me. Since the changes were introduced, I've seen nothing but praise for this on Twitter and other social media forums for the most part, and I think there's a few reasons for this actually. Number one, the Division 2 is coming into year 3, and the majority of the player base have done everything in the game and have got the majority of things that they want as well. Optimization prior to TU12.1 was a real chore, one I personally didn't mind, to be honest, aside from the shade currency, but I think a lot of people probably felt a bit annoyed they'd have to grind a ton to get just 0.8% of an upgrade on a piece of gear. And it's not a ton of new content, right? This would be old content. If it was new content, I suspect a lot of people wouldn't really care too much, because they would just jump into that new content and the optimization stuff will kind of just be going on in the background. But with old content that they've been grinding for 2 years basically, well, that's not the case, and you can kind of see why people would be annoyed by that. These changes with TU12.1 made it so that the optimization costs meant that players could finally optimize their gear in full, something I suspect a lot of players really wanted. For number 2, because of these changes, it has meant that more players are likely to look elsewhere at other builds, knowing that optimizing those builds will not be so grueling. This is something I've seen pop up numerous times on Twitter when players have been praising these changes. And number 3, due to the amount of materials required for each currency to optimize pre-TU12.1, you'd often find yourself doing activities you really didn't want to for a really long period of time. Personally, I still don't like the fact that we're forced to do projects for shade currency or any of the other kind of exclusive currency tasks, but lowering the overall cost has mitigated the amount of time you have to do things that you don't want to for the currency that you want, which is a bit of a compromise. It's certainly better than it was before. These three things, and there's a lot more, of course. I could probably write a whole script, a whole video on all the changes that people have mentioned that have made it so they feel actually good about the changes that were made. But these are just a couple of reasons why a portion of the community, and I'd probably say that the largest portion based on this poll, are really happy with the changes made with optimization. Now, it's no secret that before these changes were implemented, I really wasn't sure it was a good idea. I made a video about my concerns as well. I think the biggest issue I had is that I didn't want to jump on for an hour and be able to optimize a build in full. That to me would really have taken my motivation out of the game to grind. And the devs did say they never wanted the optimization station to interfere with the loot cycle within the game. They didn't want it to become what it was in the Division 1. And that's not my words, guys. That is exactly what Yannick said. Of course, it was kind of a selfish point I was making. You know, we all play games and want things to work a certain way for us. And I think that's pretty normal. But with that said, I had overlooked how good it would feel to finally optimize the build I'd been grinding to optimize for so long. And just as importantly, for a lot of players, move on to other builds. I mean, ultimately, it's a looter shooter with hundreds of builds. And if you're not trying to make other builds, then that's something I'm pretty guilty of, I'll be honest. You are missing out on a huge portion of the game and genre, really. So these changes have made that way more possible now, and I think that's ultimately a good thing. If I had to answer the poll myself, and I'm going to stick with what I originally said when I first read about the changes, and that's, I'm on the fence. There's obviously some really good reasons why these changes have been generally well received, I'd say across the community, which we've discussed in this video, and of course, there's way more than just the three that I've mentioned. With that said, I'm on the fence because I personally think these changes were the bare minimum effort, and in my opinion, I think what I proposed would have been better, to be honest. Reducing the amount of overall currencies needed to optimize by at least half, reducing the overall cost by about 20%, allowing the shade currency to drop from any activity, and of course more, are the suggestions that I made prior to this coming out. It was no surprise this was going to come. I knew this was. I even said in the video where I talked about what I'd like to see, that ultimately that wasn't going to happen, and what they were going to do is just reduce the cost by a certain amount, which they did. It's not that I don't think the changes are good, guys, because I actually think the community response has confirmed that anyway, right? Regardless of what I think, overall, I say the community are pretty happy with these changes, and for the health of the game, you want the most amount of people that are happy with how some has been done. And I think that's been done here. It's just for me that I saw a better way for the devs to do this, albeit it would have been a much bigger ask. Going back through editing, guys, I just want to put this part in here before I just come towards the end of the video. I do think there is one thing that I would like. As I said, ultimately I think the general community, the majority of the community, are pretty happy with these changes to optimization. But for me personally, whilst I'm actually happy with these changes, and like I said, I'm glad that I can go in, optimize the build that I've been using for so long and get as powerful as I can, even if the percentages are marginal, it's still nice to actually optimize that piece of that build, and then I can move on to other builds knowing it's not going to take me too long to optimize them. I do think there needs to be some higher reward that does mean that you have to grind a lot to get there. Right, and I don't think the game has that, and that could be something that I could put in a separate video, but I'm pulling it in here because I do think that there needs to be something that we need to grind for to get, and I think that ultimately with the optimization changes that have been made, it doesn't really feel like to me there is anything to grind for as much as there was before TU12.1, where I was grinding optimization currencies. That's what I was doing, and again, this could be a selfish note, but that's what I was doing in my time. I was grinding those optimization currencies, and now that that's gone, I don't really have that ambition to play the game as much anymore. However, if there was something that was kind of the carrot in the stick that was in the distance, which required a lot of grinding to get, that's something I'd probably do. So, just want to put that in there, guys. Bit of speculation to end the video, guys. Do you think the devs decided to reduce the cost so drastically because they wanted players to feel rewarded with optimizing before a new expansion is due to release with a level cap increase to 50? Question mark. Imagine if they hadn't made these changes and then they announced a new level cap. Players, the community would have been so mad, and rightly so. But these changes to the optimization station and the costs have made most players really happy in the short term, and more importantly, I think would help mitigate the annoyance players might have if we do get a level cap of 50, where they have to go in and then grind those optimized pieces again, right? So there is a case here that possibly these changes were made because we are getting that cap increase. Just food for thought. But that's it for today's video, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for sticking around all the way to the end. Hopefully you all have a fantastic weekend. I know there's not a lot we can all do at the moment in time. You know, can't really leave the house as such and whatever. And here in the UK, we're expecting some pretty cold weather, so it's probably wouldn't leave the house anyway. But regardless of that, hopefully you'll have a good weekend, even if it's just 2 days to take off of work. Thanks very much for watching. Until the next one, Epic out.